All right. Good afternoon, good morning, good wherever you are, folks. My name is Michael Fleischer, and with me I have Ryan Conley. And today we're going to be walking you through from vSphere admin to SRE, or Site Reliability Engineer. Where do I start? Hoping to give you some nice info today on where to go, because sometimes it's a little nebulous, and we totally understand that. So I'm going to flash the agenda up here for just a second. We've got a lot of good, like I said, a lot of good content for you here today. So I'm going to get going. Let's just get rolling here. So first up, I'm going to give you a quick little intro on me, my career progression, and why I'm here and why you should listen, I guess, maybe something like that. So basically, I graduated college with a degree in computer engineering, which is basically computer science and electrical engineering smashed together. I left, wanted to be a dev, but I fell into the infrastructure world via the job market at the time. And I became a VMware customer. My role spanned from VMware, storage, Linux architect, all the way to sort of data center manager or something. I don't know. I don't know what they called me. But basically, I started by getting to know infrastructure really well. And then I realized that I could automate everything using my development skills I learned in college. And from there, I moved into a partner role for 1 year, and I sold everything under the sun that was IT related. Literally everything. And then from there, moved into my current role at VMware as a core solution engineer. Since I'm really a developer wearing an infrastructure architect's coat, I've gravitated towards the Tonzu portfolio very heavily, and it's currently my product discipline, which means I'm a subject matter expert in my area here in Philadelphia. Should have added that. I'm from Philly. Real quick, shameless self-promotion. I have an on-demand session at VMworld called From Customer to Partner to VMware. I did it and you can too. So if you're interested in hearing more about these three little bubbles here, please click join, and it's not too long. I think it's only like 26 minutes. It's super short, right to the point, and hopefully you'll get something out of it. All right, let's move on to the reason why you're all here, which is the good stuff. So my first thoughts on everything VI admin to SRE. I'm going to be a little conceptual here first, then we'll get a little more, I don't want to say physical, we'll get a little more technological in a second. But the first thing I want to start with is the imperative. So I'm sure you're all incredibly comfortable with receiving an email or a ticket that says this, hey, we need to build 12 new VMs for this application rollout. As you read this, I'm sure there are a million questions that pop into your head about the next steps here. How big do the VMs need to be? What VLAN or subnet do they need to be on, et cetera, all that good stuff. And you know, each one of you knows exactly the steps needed in order to get that request done. So all the way through. A, I do this. B, I do this. C, I do this. D, I forgot I left the ISO attached. I got to unattach that. All that good stuff. And this is the imperative way of doing things. This is the, I know what I need to get done. So now let's figure out the steps to get it done, walk through it, click through or CLI through the whole thing and get it done. You can use this type of action in the SRE Kubernetes world, clearly. Like you can go and say kubectl apply this, or sorry, kubectl, just like, hey, build this pod for me. But it is much more helpful, and the way that Kubernetes works itself, to be declarative. So basically, at the end of the day, I want 12 copies of this application to exist somewhere, and I want them to be load balanced. So you can carve up a Kubernetes YAML file with this spec, point it to the version of the app that the developers need deployed, and just walk away. It's beautiful. Kubernetes takes care of the how for you. This whole thought process shift was tough for me. I like to be an imperative person. I've built a lot of my career on, hey, I know exactly what steps in order I need to take to get stuff done. That's what we have done for a long time, is learn the process, learn the in and out. And I had gotten so used to figuring out the how things need to be done rather than worrying about the what needs to be done. So in this brave new world, the what is all that is necessary. Next up, second thought. Boom. Please get to love CLIs and APIs if you hadn't already. You know, IT goes in ebbs and flows, where it's basically run all workloads centralized in a mainframe. Then, hey, run them all on the workstation because they're powerful. And then we're going to centralize again. And it's in and out, or in-source, outsource, in-source, outsource. We've gone, or much in the same way. We've gone from CLI everything to UI everything, and now we're back to CLI. And I hope it stays that way, because I'm a dork and I enjoy the CLI, and you can just see the text. So like what and GUIs and UIs are pretty, but if I can just have a text file that says this is what I need you to do, that's amazing. One of my favorite quotes is, a good engineer is lazy. The way I always went about that is doing something the hard way first to learn about it, and then swearing to never do that again, ever, and automate that process. My one thing that I want you to take away from this, from me, is challenge yourself for the next task that you have to do. Go out and do it via the UI, click a couple buttons, get it done, and then immediately figure out how to do that via CLI or consuming an API. Starting to flex those muscles will only help you in the future if you're not doing that already. Just getting to that point where you can say, all right, I know how to do this really well. I'm never doing it again. Let's write a little script that does that for me. One fun thing you can do in that realm is to follow Kelsey Hightower's open source guide, Kubernetes the Hard Way. You can learn the nuts and bolts of Kubernetes, and then so basically he walks you through standing everything up all the way through, all the little pieces, all the installs and all the networking, and get everything straight. And then you can immediately start using Tonzu Kubernetes Grid, because it's impossible to build a cluster by hand. And that's why we have Tonzu Kubernetes Grid. And that's why that's a thing. And now Tonzu Community Edition exists. So it's all free to play with. All right. And my third, and I don't want to say final, but because I'm going to rattle off other things, but my third and final thought for now is that all this architecture is the same. It just really is. Everything you've ever learned about vSphere and our distributed architecture is largely the same in the Kubernetes world. So super high level, I'm going to take a look at Kubernetes from like I don't want to say a 10,000 foot level, from an 100,000 foot level. We start with the users. There are users that want to consume a Kubernetes cluster via API, CLI, or even UI, which, as you all have heard, I'm not the biggest fan of, but hey, they interact with the Kubernetes control plane that understands what they want to happen. So the user want to happen, and stores it in its database. And then the control plane instructs the worker nodes to get the workloads requested built. So that, in a super high, low, whatever nutshell, that is Kubernetes. So let's go to part 2 here. What if I did this? What if I said, hey, look, your control plane is kind of like a vCenter. And oh, look, your worker nodes are kind of like ESXi. Again, from a super high level, this is all the same. It's the same sort of moniker. So yes, it all is new words and new things and new fangled add-ons. But the bottom line is, this distributed architecture remains the same in the Kubernetes world. Taking this one step further up. So much like how VMware Cloud Foundation manages multiple software-defined data centers from a single control plane, Tonzu Mission Control does something super similar for all of your Kubernetes clusters throughout the world. So again, much like vCenter controls your ESXi worker nodes, Tonzu Mission Control can control all of your individual Kubernetes clusters, which was that original graphic all bundled up. Tonzu Mission Control is incredible. If you haven't played with it yet, it's, again, that is now free from a basic standpoint. And you, again, I've said a couple of times I don't like UIs, but I do like this UI. I'll step back and say that. It is a SaaS-driven application. So we run the backend for you. You connect your Kubernetes clusters to it, and you can apply and manage policies across all of them. And it's absolutely beautiful. So that is it for me for now. With that, I'm going to hand it off to Ryan Conley to walk through some other really cool stuff here.
Hello, Ryan Conley. I'm a staff SE based in San Francisco. I've been with VMware 7 years, and with that, I've had an opportunity to learn and apply a lot of lessons learned that we'll be talking about today. Some kind of items to note is, even when I was back at the hedge fund prior to VMware, I started to see a shift. And one of those shifts was in-house developers writing their own applications, and in some cases starting to adopt Linux to address new challenges that ultimately led to new revenue for the hedge fund. After joining VMware, open source proliferation had already started. That continued in line with building over buying, and that led me to learn from other customers. So as they were building new in-house applications, testing the QA and the development of those applications, that led to more familiarity with CI/CD systems, as well as some scaling challenges for both VMs and then later as containers. And then fortunately, being in the Bay Area, I was able to learn from a lot of new adopters in this container space. So think of the proliferation of Docker starting in 2013, and then later Kubernetes, and what I'll more jokingly say the container orchestration wars. But essentially, as containers scaled, they had some new challenges, and there was a couple players earlier in the market with vSphere, Docker EE, Rancher when they had their own container orchestrator, and Kubernetes. And it became very much like the Blu-ray versus HD DVD, or if you want to go a little bit further, the VHS versus the beta wars.
Don't forget Video 2000 for all the people in the MEA out there. Video 2000 was totally a thing as well in that war.
Next slide, please. And these are all very technical challenges, but it's important to know, what are we trying to do here? And as Michael was talking about earlier, a lot of us are struggling as we adopt some of these new technologies, and we're all on our own journey, as Duffy Cooley likes to say, as we adopt these modern application stacks. So one thing I recommend is just empathy. It's definitely something that I think we need more in this world, but also just in your day-to-day jobs. Many people are struggling. Maybe they have some stuff going on at home. Maybe they're on the edge or the cusp of burnout. Or if you look at some of the reporting, like the State of Kubernetes report from 2021, just expertise in this space is still one of the #1 challenges. And that's been consistent throughout the last couple of years across reporting mechanisms. So how do you get started? Listen. In some cases, it involves bringing in new teams, or in some cases, it maybe involves communicating with teams that you don't normally like to work with, such as InfoSec, but just understanding what are their concerns. Another trend we see in these reports is people are often bringing security in late, for example, versus bringing them earlier. And we also see a shift to where security is a team sport. We need to bring them in, we need to understand their concerns, and then see how we can work towards a better resolution. So empathize what their needs are and concerns. And then another good scenario with learning and better understanding your end users is just shadowing. Understand what they're doing day to day, understand what some of their challenges are, but then also how are they being graded? What are the goals for their teams, and what metrics are they being based off of? And so to do that, we need to plan. So for some, it's a little bit of a branding exercise. Coming from IT, I did not typically talk about what was kind of the priorities of the mission, what some of our goals and key metrics were going to be to my end users. I didn't strategize with stakeholders from different lines of business, or in some cases, senior leadership. So it's good to put a strategy in. Sorry, I got muted there. But start identifying your primary customers. There's a lot of technology that we'll be talking about this week, and it's very exciting, but how are we going to actually deliver that successfully? What is it going to do for the business? And that's where I'll end with the most important thing I've learned from the scene, which is partnering with senior leadership. A consistent trend we see with some of these DevOps reports, Puppet, for example, puts out an annual report, and that matches what I've seen in the field of when you try new technologies, there's people, there's process, there's culture. And we hear time and time again, particularly with modern app sessions, when we're talking to experts on these panels, that culture is the longest thing in terms of actual adoption. So you'll hit a lot of struggles early on. Stuff's going to break, stuff's going to fail, and that's okay. You need a high level senior leadership position to push down and keep driving that change, because there's more ways to fail than there is to succeed. So with putting the strategy in place and identifying who you're going to be working with, the next step is understanding. And so, for example, Michael was talking about adopting new, in some cases, positions and adopting new skills, but we don't want to just throw everything out and start from scratch. One thing we learned in the field with OpenStack, for example, was it was a little bit too much change. So instead, I recommend meeting with your stakeholders and understanding what's working well. And in some cases, this could be a developer working with an operations team or a VI admin, and understand what they're doing that's improving their lives. So for example, us kind of taking a page from their book and learning how to do either like source control, for example, just with documentation, or in some cases, see what they're doing that they're really excited about. So for example, a customer recently put in a wildcard that enabled their customers, their developers, to more quickly get an application online. At the same time, it's good to understand what isn't working well. As Michael was talking about, we as VI admins have a lot of experience and a lot of skills around disaster recovery, for example, or just thinking for failure that maybe someone who's writing an application for the first time or trying a new style of application writing may not be thinking about. And maybe you can help bridge some gaps. And also look back. So in terms of adopting new steps, new people, new process, this whole culture shift as we adopt new technology, stuff's going to break, stuff's going to fail, and that's okay. In some cases, it might be a big failure. In other cases, it might be a small failure. But the key is to keep moving forward and not fall back to where we were. And the way you do that is you analyze failures as a team. A teammate might pick up on a new idea or a new way or just something that could be improved, and sharing and applying those lessons moving forward. And then lastly, it's also communicating and understanding how are all of our systems interconnected. In some cases, I had a scenario where a customer put in just a brand new feature in their application. It was a mobile app. They were able to take a picture with their phone, upload it, and it improved the end customer's life. They could check in the process much faster. However, the size of that image led to a cascading failure. They found out how much their inner systems were related and also what system can take down the next. And so in closing, there's a lot of new skills in the market. And as an SE working with customers, we learned that my needs might be different from your needs. You're on a journey, your peers are on a journey, and there's a lot of trends in the market. Some a little more buzzword bingo, some are a little bit more just kind of frills, but others are actually opportunities to apply. So for example, some good ways to apply some new skills is just learning from your developers how they do their source control, and not necessarily go learn how to actually start writing code, although you can, I recommend it. But how can you just better improve your life? How can you better improve your day-to-day maintenance? And this could be through improved documentation through sources like Git. So I jokingly say, do you Git? As well as applying lessons from peers. So what are they doing well? What are they not doing well? How can you collaborate? And so some ways that you could reevaluate is, how are you adopting new technologies? What's best for your journey? So for example, how can you use some of these newer trends in the market, such as Knative or serverless? How can you take essentially an event source and then drive a function based off an event? And so there's an open source project using Knative as well as the VMware Event Broker appliance, where you could start evaluating new tooling for your environment. What could work better for your next project? What can work better to improve compliance or just improve visibility? There's also ways to just get your hands dirty on learning new technologies. And that's where Michael mentioned earlier. Tonzu Community Edition is now very quick and easy to install, to maybe start learning, how do your developers currently do work today, or how do they currently learn, or how do you like to learn? Has it been a process where you had to go somewhere else, maybe had to install a couple things, whereas now on a couple lines, really just one line on a Mac terminal, you can have a Kubernetes cluster up and running and start testing and learning. And I point to the larger community's efforts as well. So several groups, Puppet, for example, puts out the State of DevOps report every year. I highly recommend, if nothing else, just reading the executive summary. Understand what's working for mature teams, what's not working for immature teams, and where's in the middle, and how can you help apply it to your journey. And then lastly, a re-hit. It's very important to be open and supportive. So going back to empathy, understanding what's working well in your teams, what are they doing, how are they kind of trying new tools, be supportive of the failures, and then learning and evaluating and going from there.
One thing I will add for that first bullet, that Git can be super confusing when you first start looking at it. Like you want it to make sense, but it just doesn't until it clicks. One way I got around this was using a Git GUI. And again, I'm stepping on what I said earlier about 5 times here. But if you can find a really nice Git GUI that you like, I personally now still use Git Kraken. It's like the greatest application ever. It's really pretty. But the biggest part about it, beyond like, hey, I don't have to hit the CLI every time I want to do a commit, I can see what happened along the chain. So all of the changes, all of the forks, all the good stuff, all the branches, like all of that becomes very visual and right in front of you. That was the way I got to learn Git very quickly. So I am a very visual learner. So having that little Guitar Hero looking stack of here's what happened with this code base, it made it click really quickly. And the app itself allows you to, like, hey, if you want to push something to a repository, you just say, here's the changes I want made. It tracks and sees the changes already. So it's like, hey, these three files changed. They had 4 lines of code change. And you can say, all right, push these up to the master, boom, or the origin, done. So very highly recommend, against better judgment of what I said earlier, find a Git GUI that you like if it's really just not making sense. Because again, it is super, it's convoluted. It just really is.
And then Michael made a good plug, which is VS Code, which is another great way to start learning, both either Git or as well as I'll make it a plug that's a little different, but a lot of us in the VMware community know about bloggers. And for some who want to start practicing and flexing those Git muscle memory skills, putting either a blog or in some cases your internal documentation in Git is a good way to start practicing.
Completely agree. And with that, that is all we have for you folks. Please take your survey. We want to come do this again and go deeper. This was our first step. So with that, I am more than willing to answer any questions that anybody on here has.
I think there was one question. Do you have info on VS Code setup for VMware Python SDK?
Ooh, that's a good one. So shameless self-plug number 65 for me. So tomorrow I have a session called, actually, I don't remember the entire title, but the bottom line is I'm working with Patrick Kramer, and we're doing how to become, or how an SRE works on both Mac and Windows. And it uses both the Python SDK, it uses just attaching to normal APIs over Postman. So we've got some cool things going on there. So the answer is the repo that we are going to be sharing during that chat will have some of that stuff in there for you. I don't know if it has all of the Python vSphere SDK set up, but I can work towards that. It is a living, breathing repo that I am willing to update for that. So that's a great question.
I would say that's going to be a great session for just learning how to set up your laptop. It can be daunting in itself, and this space is daunting already. So that'll be a really fun session, and particularly for maybe peers that are on a PC and you start learning like, oh, it is a little different, or oh, this is why people prefer Mac in some scenarios. So it'll be fun to see it side by side.
Good thing to say, Ryan. So I have created 2 scripts that will basically kickstart your machine for you. So that's the big output there. Is I'm probably giving away too much, so oh well. But basically kickstart your Windows machine to be ready to start interacting with APIs. Same thing with Mac. And the actual title is, it's really, really sad that I don't know it off the top of my head. Just give me 1 second. I'm sorry. Cross-platform SRE, no OS left behind. That is the name of the session. You can just search. Honestly, the fastest way to get to it is to search for my last name, because it's unique. Search for it in the content catalog, and you'll find it there.
And then John, I see your question. I'm going to send you a link right now on a really great way to get started.
There you go. Tonzu Community Edition dropped yesterday. It is free. It is delightful. It is a quick and easy. So literally, if I think about this properly, if you're running a Mac, I'll start there. You can run 2 commands on Homebrew. Basically, you tap the Tonzu tap, and then you download Tonzu Community Edition. And with that, you can bootstrap a cluster right on your machine, super small cluster to play with in no time flat. It's actually really cool. So you say create Tonzu, create cluster, and then -- UI pops up a little web browser for you. You fill out all the stuff you need, all the details, and it'll go blast a cluster wherever you, or Tonzu Kubernetes grid, which is just an upstream conformant Kubernetes cluster, wherever on your local machine or on a vSphere cluster somewhere to get playing. Really cool stuff.
So I'm putting the command in the chat for Mac users. For PC users, Chocolaty is still underway. I think there's some backend licensing stuff with Chocolaty or something. But the GitHub page for Tonzu Community Edition can walk a user how to install on a PC.
There you go. I said 2 commands. You can make it 1 command by putting the 2 ampersands. So boom, 1 command, and you can be ready to install Tonzu Community Edition. That's amazing. All right.
Go have some fun.
Seriously, please reach out. I'm mfleischer@vmware.com and Ryan Conley. I don't know yours offhand. You are Conley?
rconley@vmware.com.
Perfect. Please feel free to reach out to either one of us. We are more than willing to talk about whatever. Like I'll talk about this stuff all day. Please reach out. I'll hop on a one-on-one, whatever you guys want, because this is where the world's heading. And the faster you can get on the train, the better it's going to be for everybody. And it's a ton of fun. Let's just be fair. Let's be very clear. This is a ton of fun.
Thank you, Antonio. Is there a hands-on lab? So Alvin, I would say there's when you say for this, are we talking about Tonzu Community Edition, or are we talking about some other things like learning Git? Tonzu? Yeah, I'll send you a couple links into the chat.
Specifically 2233 is a pretty good walkthrough of everything Tonzu Kubernetes grid. It'll take you from 0 to here's what building a cluster and interacting with the cluster looks like. I worked on that lab, so yay. Again, I've plugged myself like 12 times here. I'm going to keep going.
You want to say?
It's called, here, I'll get the link for you, but it's 2233 is the number, and that's what we call it internally. So I rattle that off without people without, empathy here. There you go.
Yeah, and then lab 2235-01 is going to be more of a developer workflow. So if you're plugging your lab, I'll plug mine.
Love it.
Thank you, Alvin.
I will hang out as long as you folks want to. I'm done for the day after this, which is shocking. I've been doing things all day. VMworld, this has been a ton of fun so far. Then I had a issue with my kids and all that good stuff. But again, that's the world. But I'm here, so I'm more than willing to hang out. Oh, I see people slowly trickling away. Okay, cool. What beer do you? Oh, Dip Brenner, you know me too well. It really depends, right? Like, what are you in the mood for right now? Are you in the mood for double IPA? Are you in the mood for Belgian? I don't know. Right now, I'm gonna go grab something nice and delicious after this.
Or Oktoberfest.
There you go. My wife just went and bought a whole bunch of that. So there you go. Do we think VMware will be back in person? I hope so. Certainly hope so. I know
next year. This is above our pay grade, but if you look at KubeCon next week, is a mixed, part virtual, part physical. That could be a good trend moving forward. I personally love, like Spring One, for example, got me into the mindset of having channels, which I love. We have in VMworld this year, where you can kind of change tracks, and that is a very nice benefit of virtual, but you don't get the social interactions and just kind of having the spontaneous conversations with someone else and learning what they're doing and be like, oh, that sounds really cool. So
agreed. I miss in person. Again, we're doing, the world is doing what it needs to be doing for the right reasons, but my goodness, I miss in person. It's so much fun to connect with all you folk in a room rather than this and two talking heads and nobody else has their camera on. I prefer to see everybody's face.
So Carlos, you're asking, will we post on YouTube? So our Handson Lab, I'm actually a member of the 2235 Tonzu for Developers Handson Lab. We will have a guided workshop on Wednesday. So that could be something you can join live. If not, you can ping me with questions. That Handson Lab catalog will be updated after VMworld and you can take it anytime.
All right, we got some good questions, or at least long questions here. That's great. Let's see.
Oh, Patrick has a throwback to ESX3, which is awesome.
There you go.
Yeah, Patrick, you bring up a good point. I was at VMworld Barcelona, which is 2 years ago now, and going back to the empathy standpoint, but there was an admin that we did a little Kubernetes 101. It was a very small group of 15 people. This was kind of like a side hall type event that VMware was putting on. And at the end, he just put his hands in his head. He's like, I don't get this. They're asking me to do this yesterday. I'm just really struggling here. So I really like Michael's analogy of being like, hey, here's what you know. And like, we've been doing this a long time. You know, you, for example, 10 plus years, you understand the control plane, the data plane, the separation. That very much still applies in Kubernetes, like, or even NSX, for example. Like the first time you see NSX, you're like, ugh, and then you start kind of understanding like, okay, here's my control plane, here's how I interact with it. And the really beautiful thing is Michael was talking about like learning the API. Kubernetes brings an open and consistent API experience. So like once you learn it once, you really can start applying it all over, you know, whether it be inside of vSphere, inside Amazon, Google, you name it.
At Mr. Dip Brenner, great question. So for specific to platform ops, I have not seen that become a thing yet, but I'm speaking just from my own point of view. I would love that to become a thing. I was actually going to start to go into that during this chat, but I didn't want to swoop down too low. I love the pipeline thing, right? Like you write something once and then you just push something to something and a trigger happens and then stuff happens. And you know, I use a lot of happens there, but that's what a pipeline is. You have all these modular pieces that do things. I would love that to become a thing.
Yeah, Michael, I think since this SRE is in the title of this presentation, I think a pipeline method should be your North Star.
Agreed.
And that's not just like dev aside, but you think of any changes in the environment. Even, you know, as a team matures, you actually take away root access, and any change goes through a pipeline. And so that way, any change is tested and validated before going into production.
Actually, speaking of which, we had to do, so as I said, I was part of the modern application unit platform or product discipline. We had to do a demo video walking through a lot of the Tonzu portfolio using pipelines. And I'm more than willing to share that video out with anybody that I did. There was a contest, I didn't win, but I feel like mine was pretty darn good. So if anybody on here would like to see a walkthrough of pipelining and code changes and then that reflecting to a production deployment, I am more than happy to share that out. Just please reach out. I don't have a link handy to share, but I can whip that up in no time.
And then
you
there's
got
a
it,
really good question from Daniel. How will the salt acquisition play a role in our work? And I would just kind of look at, like, we're talking about SREs and we're talking about learning new technologies. So configuration management infrastructure as code has been around a long time. But Kubernetes is bringing in a new pattern called operators. So going back to Michael's desired state, and there's reconciliation loops that get brought in. So I would definitely follow. Tom Haidt was in the keynote. He has a couple sessions at VMworld. Anytime Tom speaks, I listen. He is just extremely intelligent, but I would definitely point to him, particularly because you asked about Salt Stack, and he's leading some of those efforts.
Great point. All right, I have 4 takers, so I've taken your names down. Actually, if you all wouldn't mind shooting me an email, so I have your email address, and I will share out the video with you as soon as we get off here. So I'll put that in the chat. That would probably help, wouldn't it? Stand by.
Maybe you should put it on GitHub.
Oh, there you go. See, now you're thinking. So yeah, again, anybody who would like it, please just drop me a line and I'll send it out immediately.
Yeah, Daniel, you're asking, that name is Tom Haidt, H-I-T-E.
He's legit. I agree. He's one of those people when he's like, oh, he's saying something that it must be important. I should probably turn my ears on.
Yeah, he was doing true SRE work 7 years ago. Just smart.
All right, I have 1 email in chat, which I'm taking down now. But again, the rest of you, if you could just shoot me a note, shoot me an email. And again, I will share it out immediately. Otherwise, I just have your name and that's not going to get me too far. I'll just scream your name out in the ether. You won't get my video. There's another one. Perfect. Oh, they're coming in now. Perfect.
Awesome.
Awesome. Thank you, Jay.
Yeah, I would also look up the VMware Event Broker appliance. There's several sessions both here on VMware Code. Robert Gusky, for example, I know has a session. I think he has 2 sessions, as well as William Lamb, Michael Gash. All those are contributors, as well as Patrick Kramer that Michael mentioned earlier. So VMware Event Broker appliance could be some new tools you can add in your bag, maybe for maintaining mission critical VMs in your environment, with some new kind of fangled ways, integrating your Slack, etc. Or maybe just a better way to achieve compliance, for example, just to have, hey, why did that change? Change it back. Desired state.
I love desired state. It's one of those things, again, it took me a while to get my head wrapped around. I was like, wait, I want to build stuff. I want to see how it's done. I want to know how it's done. And when my boss asked me how it happened, I'll be like, well, I did this. But you got to untether yourself from that and just trust the process. I'll throw that one out and gonna leave that out there.
Yeah, DSC. Yeah,
I agree.
So Michael, check out, I put a fling. So yes, I agree. And if you look at what we've been doing the last couple of years, we now have a VM operator that's bringing the Kubernetes API to non Kubernetes objects. And he's asking about VMs. And then for VMs in particular, there's a VMware Fling that I posted where we're bringing desired state. But you're right. I think Salt could be a good avenue for us to improve. The key there is, like, we don't want to force Salt on you. Like, you might be a chef or an Ansible shop, and that's okay too, which is why we've brought in a REST-based API, and we've been really working hard. And now we're extending the Kubernetes API to the vSphere API.
You know what? I'm going to go back and course correct something I said earlier. Mr. Diprenner asked about, do you see scripts moving to pipelines? And I said no initially, but what I meant was pipelining is very much a thing in the community. Building things in pipelines for application development is a thing, and that's the way you go. I specifically have not seen it for like scripting something in PowerShell to do something for VMware. I don't know, I'm just making up stuff. I would love to see that happen, where, again, reusable code or reusable stuff is beautiful. And if you can just write something once and then just have it trigger when you push something somewhere, again, that is the North Star. That is the way everything should be, because everything is done once, triggerable, auditable, maintainable, all that good stuff. Reproducible. It's a great word.
The area in Ansible.
Yeah, I don't know much about the VRA and Ansible integration. I know it's there, and so I can't really speak too much more of that. But Salt does some cool stuff. Just, I've played with it once or twice and seen a bunch of demos. I know what it does. I can talk about it, but I don't know enough to be super dangerous about it. But Salt, once that is fully folded in, I know we're obviously, we had a product here, and you got to fold them together. It takes time. Once that's fully integrated, and as we start to iterate on it, rather than just get it embedded in our stack, things will get really cool and really easy. All right, down to you final 26 that still want to listen to us jabber on about God knows what.
Good night. One thing I didn't think to plug, someone was asking about Handson. Click the workshops.
Yeah, good point. That's well, okay. Now with the 22 we have left here, how many of you have Tech Plus passes to VMworld? Because the guided workshops that he's talking about, I believe.
Michael does.
Oh, wait, sorry. You're talking about the developer workshops, not the guided workshop. I'm sorry. Ignore me.
Yeah, so it's Spring 1, which is largely a conference focused on developing software as well as kind of maintaining and operating Kubernetes platforms. They updated all the workshops and they're free. So those are now live. Everything I was talking about, Knative and learning serverless, there's a lab for that. There's labs for learning Tonzu Community Edition, as well as some more advanced, I think APIs, things like that, or just kind of standardizing your Kubernetes tooling with a project called Carvel. So those are all there. And then in addition, we were talking about Handson Labs, which you all should definitely take. And those will be, guided, more extensive workshops, if you will, but it's really like getting your hands dirty in lab through several models. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Frederick. I'm proud of us. Neither one of us had a Slack message go off the entire time we closed our Slack.
I way closed it. Let's see what my phone says right now. Oh yeah, I have 4 billion notes. Okay, cool.
I jokingly say 9 out of 10 Slack chimes today have been from a presenter.
Yep.
Yes, I would love to go back to Barcelona.
It'll happen. Don't mark my words, but it'll happen. I'll see you there.
Food's so good too.
I have not been to Barcelona.
Barcelona is fun. I like VMworld US too. It's really big. Barcelona is a little bit more close knit, not as spread out, which can be a good thing. And then yeah,
I'm a huge soccer/football fan, so I cannot wait to go to Barcelona and go see a game.
Yes.
Care what game? I'll go see a 12 and under game. I got to see something.
That's resource to learn code. Good question. Jacob, I don't have a specific, like, this is a one-stop shop, but I would say, like, what I'm personally doing is I've selected Python for a project. And just kind of like when you pick a project to try a new technology in your organization, I would pick something that is relevant to you and you can see the outcome. Like for me, I have a little pet project I want to do. I'm a car guy. I want to try and solve a problem in my little community. Spoke with some peers and they recommend like an interactive Python to get started. So that's where I'm going for my journey. But maybe you want to do something else. Like Go, for example, is very popular. Also has a very steep learning curve. But kind of figure out that project and kind of then figure out what you want to do. And maybe your company, for example, has something, or maybe you just go to Udemy and buy a $10 course. Michael, what do you think? What's
shameless self-plug number, as I said, 3875 here. So this is the repo that Patrick and I are going to be talking about tomorrow. And it gives you some really, really basic ways of just getting started with understanding what you're trying to do. But yeah, but going back to the project aspect, that's the way I've always explained it to people is just pick something that you want to do, something, right? Like even if it's, like I said in the chat, like the one thing that you just did in the UI, figure out let's learn how we can do that via API or CLI. Just pick that as your like guiding star. And then you got to figure out which language you want to use or which way you want to hit it or which, there's all of that too. So keeping it relevant, like Ryan said, is absolutely necessary. Python is just huge in the world of everything today. PowerShell now runs on Linux and Mac too. So I will say that PowerShell. So, all right, let me back up. I know Windows and Microsoft stuff very, very well because I was an admin for years. Not the biggest proponent. I will tout my Mac all day and say, this is my bulletproof, this is my go forward. But PowerShell is probably, I'm being recorded, so I got to be careful. Probably the best thing Microsoft has ever written. PowerShell is super awesome. I absolutely love it. It's very well documented. It's very easy to get into. It's fun. And you can do things in one line that you shouldn't be able to do online at all. And I really enjoy it. And the fact that you can install it on Mac now allows for all the scripts that I've written over the years to be portable. which is really cool. So if there's something you want to do that's in the Windows honestly just vSphere world because of Power CLI, I would start there to start getting used to stuff like that. Then, like somebody mentioned, there's the Python, the Python SDK for vSphere. You can start to do that and roll through that stuff. So again, that's all just syntactically, where do you want to go? Do you want to learn Python? Because it's a bit of a deeper dive than PowerShell. PowerShell is line by line interpretive coding, and PowerShell or Python can be, you can develop full apps in Python, and people do. So I don't know if I made sense what I said there. I just was rambling, but
And Michael also recommended the code capture in vCenter, which
great point. That used to be called Onyx, and it is now built into vCenter. That makes me super happy. You can click a button, hit record, go do stuff, and it'll spit out what it did behind the scenes, or what it, an estimate of what it did behind the scenes. And you can really learn stuff super quickly because it tells you what it did. Good point.
So Jacob, I'm sorry, Sean, you're asking about some API resources. I'm going to send you, it's a little known site, but it's they call it the developer portal, a little bit of a misnomer, but it just all the API documentation is there. So I'm putting that in the chat now. The nice thing about that is you can then select, and there's an API reference, and you can kind of see like what the commands could look like, what the calls should be, responses, etc.
I love that site. I'm a dork. I'll sit there and just dig through that site sometimes and just look at what APIs are available, and just to know, so that somebody asks me a question, I can spit it back quick. And yes, the VMware Code Slack people are
Good call.
intensely helpful and quick. It's ridiculous how quickly you can get a response on there that's on point.
This has been a lesson in how quick can I Google and get a response. I knew that. Go here.
Actually, here, while we're all sitting here,
Best book for learning Kubernetes. So Archer, Michael mentioned Kubernetes the hard way. I think it's a good exercise in like, wow, this is really difficult. There's absolutely a better way. And that's
even if you don't go do it, just reading through it and just like understanding that there's a billion pieces to it, and there are companies like VMware that make it super easy for you. Sorry to cut you off, but yeah.
Yeah. So Archer, I would say if you're looking for a book, there's definitely a couple, but I would first want to understand, are you looking for just like 101, or are you trying to go in production? Because there's a lot of meat in between. So cube.academy isn't a book, but if you're looking to do like bite-sized sections on understanding the fundamentals all the way up to getting certified, cube.academy. And then, oh yeah, Kubernetes the hard way, nice. And then vBrown Bag, the VMware community, for example, is currently doing a series on getting your CKA, which is
Great point. That is
very much in line with getting your VCAP for vSphere. I'm sorry, your DCV or others. It's a hands-on break fix exam, and so that's a good way if you want to learn. Deploy Tonzu Community Edition on your laptop, spin up a cluster, start breaking stuff, and I would definitely plug that along with your learning as you're reading to help reinforce. Well, yeah, Michael brings up a good point that the books are outdated pretty quickly. Some of the better ones, like Nigel
Poulton.
Yeah.
Nigel Poulton.
Yeah. So there's Kubernetes up and running that it comes to mind. And essentially, if you buy the PDF version, you can sometimes get subscribed to updates. But it depends. I personally, I like watching a video and then just like breaking stuff hands-on versus like actually sitting still and reading is a little bit more difficult for me these days. I prefer to do that on a beach for the book.
Honestly, the way I went about really getting like down and dirty was, I think it's A Cloud Guru's CKA class. It does a really good job of explaining stuff. Again, it's outdated, right? Because they don't rev them every month when things change in the Kubernetes world, but it's enough to give you a really good start of understanding what, where, why it all is. CKA again, it's like Ryan said, it's very much the VCAP, right? So you're diving down, you're understanding everything, and you're troubleshooting, and you're going. Uh-oh, and now all my kids are yelling, so that's fun. So I might have to drop here soon. Yep, I literally have all three of my children crying at once. I think I have to drop here.
Yeah, and Michael mentioned blogs. I'm not a Twitter fan for anything other than work. I got onto Twitter in college because a college professor told me to, but then I very quickly got ingrained with the greater VMware community. So blogs would get posted, and that's why, once a day I scroll Twitter and open a blog and read something, and maybe I don't fully understand it, but maybe I'll find is that Mike Foley reference? But yeah, Mike Foley used to post excellent information on security. Now you have
Fleischer. Follow him. He's on there.
He's calling me out now. I'll take that. Yeah, follow me on Twitter at Michael Fleischer. Appreciate it, Mike.
No problem.
Good point. Thank you. Or you might just see something on Knative. Patrick Kramer's been punking out content on the VMware Event Broker appliance. William Lamb comes to mind for someone who's always learning. Kit Colbert posted a great article recently about, he started as an intern, now he's CTO, and that took a lot of growth in between. Some of that was just learning new skills when he was back actually doing active development work. If you don't know, he did like storage vMotion and helped with vMotion, or just applying new skills and managing teams. So like Dunbar's number, for example, is another thing I've been reading lately, but just how to understand orgs and teams as they grow. So it's really, Twitter's great for just learning new tech, new people, new process. There's some leaders I follow that I trust. And every now and then there's a SpaceX tweet, but otherwise it's pretty much work related.
All right, it is coming up on 6:20 here. We're half hour after almost a half hour after we were supposed to stop. So thank you all for sticking around. That's awesome. Yeah, I had a blast. It was a lot of fun. And again, I want to do this again deeper with Ryan. So please take the survey, respond nicely or poorly, whatever you want, but nicely so we can do this again, because I'm more than happy to do it again. My jaw will flap all day.
Oh, thank you, Patrick. Yeah, and I'm on the Kubernetes. I'm sorry, the VMware code Slack. So
I created Kubernetes, what he just said.
Yeah. Thank you.
My daughter is crying outside my office, but yes, thank you so much, everyone. This feels good. Feels good to get some some good compliments here. I appreciate it. We worked hard on this. All right, down to the final 10 that are not us.
I guess we should ask each other, what are we learning? What are you learning, Michael?
What am I learning right now? I'm learning how to deal with 3 children under the age of 5. So I'm doing a lot of Knative stuff right now, having a lot of fun with that. Because serverless is just fun. It just is. How about you?
Knative is actually, I've been kind of poking around with that with Viva. Patrick and I recently did a VMUG on it, so I definitely want to spend some more time with it. It was key, like a key challenge for me was like, what could I do with this? And I actually now have something that I'm researching. So content library in vSphere, for example, doesn't really tell you, hey, there's something new. And as it relates to Kubernetes and the TKG service. So I'm trying to figure out a way, like, can I take an event source such as, hey, there's a new release, and then what can I do with that as a function? So in this case, a customer just wants to have better notifications. And so I'm looking into that. I'm also following eBPF, so the Berkeley packet filter. So Linux can do a lot of cool stuff in the kernel, and eBPF is doing some interesting things around network security. So like a KubeCon next week, I'll be going to the eBPF day.
Good
I know
call.
coworker Duffy Cooley's doing a lot of work there, so I think it'd be worth following, like how the Cilium CNI, for example, was just adopted by Amazon.
Yeah. So that's great points. eBPF is something that sticks out in my head, and I just haven't taken the time to dive in yet. But you can do some really cool stuff with just the stuff that's in Linux, right?
I jokingly say my Twitter is just retweets on XYZ. So it's been retweets on Kubernetes, Service Mesh, and now eBPF.
It's fine. I'll take it. All righty. Last call for questions, and then I'll close it out here.
Last call for know-it-alls.
Yes, exactly.
I haven't been to trivia in a long time.
It's been a minute. It's been a minute. All righty. Again, just about a half hour past. That's amazing. Thank you all for hanging out. Have fun. Enjoy VMworld. It's a lot. We know it's a lot, especially because it's not physical. It's a lot virtual, but please enjoy. There's so much good content out there, not including mine. But yeah, there's so much good content. So please just enjoy, bask in it. And again, you have our email addresses now. If you need anything, please reach out. We're all in.
All in. All right, team.
All right, folks. Thank you. Have a good night.
Have a great week. Cheers.